Welcome to the Lafcadio Hearn Japanese Gardens. Here we honour the life of the Irish-Greek writer Patrick Lafcadio Hearn, who was born in 1850. He became famous in America and later Japan. There he became a revered teacher and a Japanese citizen. Hearn had an Irish father and a Greek mother, and he was raised in Ireland until he was age 19. Afterwards, he set sail for America, never to return. In 1890, he travelled to Japan, where he stayed until his death in 1904. His talent and inquiring mind produced a life of writing, often focused on exotic cultures. Although he's often thought of as an American writer, his Irish upbringing has come into focus in recent years. These gardens recount Hearn's life story through the language of stone and sculpted landscape, taking inspiration from Greece, America, Ireland, and of course, Japan. Our story begins here in the Victorian Garden. The design of this area is inspired by the traditional Victorian planting style when vibrant colours and bedding varieties were in vogue. This garden commemorates the early childhood of Patrick Lafcadio Hearn. Although born to a Greek woman, Patrick Hearn's formative years were spent in his father's homeland of Ireland. His guardian, Sarah Brennan, had a holiday villa in Tramore and took the boy here during the summers. Patrick's parents, Charles and Rosa, were absent for most of the boy's youth. They had, however, honoured his birthplace of Lafcada, Greece, by giving him the unusual middle name Lafcadio. In Victorian Tramore, Patrick's imagination was fueled by his new surroundings. The sights and sounds of the town would stay with him forever. Next, we will visit the Transition Garden. This garden reflects the stage of Patrick's life between childhood and manhood and contains many hints at an extraordinary life ahead. In Japanese gardens, rocks and stones have many hidden meanings. Here in the Transition Garden, we reflect the extraordinary life journey ahead for young Patrick Hearn. Two rock formations in this area represent a giant turtle and, on the opposite side, a crane in flight. A third rock formation represents the islands of Japan themselves, where Hearn's life would eventually take him. When his father Charles came to Tramore to visit 7-year-old Patrick, they walked together on the beach. This would be the last time they would ever see each other. Afterwards, Charles dropped out of his son's life entirely, leaving him with little more than vague memories. When Patrick grew into his teens, he began to display a talent for creative writing at school. Meanwhile, his guardian Sarah Brennan was losing her fortune, and in 1869 she decided to send her young charge to America. Patrick Lafcadio Hearn left Europe behind, never looking back. The flora of the American garden is native to the state of Ohio, where Hearn first became known as a writer. The trees here are quaking aspen and staghorn, and purple echinacea flowers add a blaze of colour in the summertime. The prairie grasses in this area are calamagrostis and miscanthus. They symbolise the Mississippi River and represent Hearn's journey from Ohio to New Orleans. When Patrick arrived in America in 1869, he travelled to Cincinnati, Ohio. There he met a printer who helped him to become a journalist. Patrick had at last found his path in life. During his time in America, he had stopped using the name Patrick and was now known simply as Lafcadio Hearn. His middle name had always reminded him of his Greek heritage, and now he was embracing this connection fully. The Greek garden represents this connection and is comprised of large stones and Mediterranean plants. Pride of place goes to an ancient olive tree next to a saltwater well. This feature tells the story of the naming of Athens, how the gods Athena and Poseidon offered gifts to obtain the patronage of the city. Athena's gift is represented by the olive tree and Poseidon's by the saltwater well. Hearn's classical education had introduced him to such Greek legends, instilling in him a love of fantasy and Greek culture that would endure throughout his life. These fantastic stories, when combined with the Irish fairy tales of his youth, would plant seeds of inspiration for his own future work in Japan. A wisteria frame leads us to our arrival in Japan. The landscape has changed to small rolling hills. Japanese holly, bamboo, pieris and others here are cloud pruned in the Japanese style. The traditional Japanese tea house creates a temporary respite from the complexities of daily life. As you walk by, you may be lucky enough to catch a glimpse of a traditional tea ceremony, performed as it has been done over the centuries. The tea garden was created by a Japanese gardener from Kyoto. It includes hand-carved items such as the stone basin and lantern. In 1890, Lafcadio Hearn arrived in Japan. Captivated by the country and its people, he prolonged his stay. He met Setsu Koizumi, the daughter of a samurai family, and within a year, the two were married. Hearn would later adopt her family name as his own and became a Japanese citizen. He would go on to write 13 books about Japan before his death in 1904. Now known as Koizumi Yakumo, Hearn played a vital role in preserving Japanese legends and folk tales, and in explaining Japanese culture and customs to the wider world. This is the kokoro, or heart of the garden. The natural spring which rises here feeds a small stream and the 3 ponds of the gardens. The Japanese name for little spring or small fountain is Koizumi, which is also Hearn's adopted Japanese name. Here you can see the Koizumi stones, which represent Hearn amidst his Japanese family, shielded by a protective stone. The sound of the flowing water has been enhanced by placing sharp stones in the stream bed. A natural grotto has been drawn into the garden design to reflect a famous place of pilgrimage in Japan. Across a little bridge lies a large turtle-shaped rock formation covered in black mondo grass. This feature represents the story of Urashima Taro, a Japanese legend which mirrors the Irish tale of Oshin and Tir na Nog. Across the bridge is an old sycamore woodland which has been underplanted with Japanese cherries, pines, anemones, helleborus, pieris and other woodland species. The boardwalk through the centre is bordered by Fatsia japonica, which grew in Hearn's own garden in Matsue, Japan. Hearn found great joy in gardens and garden creatures. Flowering trees he especially loved, including the spectacular sakura blossom. In Japan, his love of folklore and fairy tales was reawakened by his encounters with Chinese and Japanese legends, many of which were sourced by his wife Setsu. Indeed, Japan has many strange stories about the spirits of trees who would assume human form. One favorite story of Hearn's is the tale of Aoyagi. Aoyagi is a young woman who is the spirit of a green willow tree. She assumed human form in order that she should marry her love. But her life was cut short as it was discovered that somebody had needlessly, carelessly felled her spiritual tree. This next area contains the largest of the garden ponds, fed by a little waterfall tumbling over azalea-clad boulders. It is enclosed by bamboo and pine, with copious planting of camellias and Japanese maple. The Gardens of Peace and Harmony represent Hearn's happiness in family life and his literary success in Japan. The pond here reminds us of a Japanese legend recounted by Hearn. The Fountain of Eternal Youth is a tale of a pond where those who drank of the water became young again. Having struggled and sometimes faced starvation in his early career, Hearn rose to be a respected professor at the University of Tokyo. One of the happiest events in his life was the birth of his first son, Kazuo. Hearn, the nomad and the loner, had settled into family life. He and Setsu would have 3 more children together. This wooden pavilion is quite unique. The style of structure is known in Japan as an azumaya or summer pavilion. Designed by architect Mike Roberts, the style is reminiscent of the azumaya in Karatsu Castle in Kyushu, Japan. It was constructed of Irish timber by 2 Tremor carpenters, Richard Cowman and Alan Malloy. This is an authentic Japanese structure in every way. Inside we can see the intricacy of the roof details and the Japanese carpentry, which typically avoids the use of visible nails, screws or bolts. Because it is situated on the lower level of this steeply sloping site, the intricate roof details are clearly visible from the upper approach and from the central lawn. Here, visitors are often regaled with the legend of a living god. This tale tells one man's struggle to rescue his town from an imminent tsunami. The final area comprises a raked gravel garden with an impressive statue rock as its centerpiece and fronted by an altar stone. Pride of place is given to a bronze sculpture of Lafcadio Hearn, gifted by the city of Matsue, his first home in Japan. On the opposite side, we have recreated some aspects of Hearn's favorite north garden in Matsue, which he viewed from his study. These include a cherry tree, an old twisted pine pruned in the Japanese style, and a small pond with lotus flowers. Lafcadio Hearn died in Japan in 1904, leaving behind a remarkable legacy. Here in these gardens, the circle of his life is completed. Having travelled round the world in his footsteps, we remember Hearn's spiritual return to Ireland through this Remembrance Garden.